Welcome one and all to episode 48 of the NFL Draft Breakdown Podcast. I'm your host, Seth Cox. With me tonight, my co-host, Justin Higdon. And Justin, we just watched the Arizona Cardinals get back to their winning ways, about to take over the NFL and head to the Super Bowl. But the rest of the NFL is basically at the quarter pole of the season. So we were going to kind of look back at some takes and some talk about the 2016 draft, and then kind of give our opinions on what the rookies are doing so far. So tonight's episode is going to be kind of heavy on looking back and at what guys are doing based on what we said, and then we'll do a little bit of looking ahead at this week in college football. But Justin, how are you doing, man?
I'm good. I'm wearing for anyone who watches the YouTube videos, which I think it's like 5 people. I'm wearing a Chicago Cubs hat right now, but I actually just watched my favorite team, the Cleveland Indians, get a playoff baseball win tonight. So good year for Cleveland sports. If we're not talking about football, if we're talking about football, they are the Cleveland Browns are the only remaining winless team, which depending on how you're looking at this year could be a good thing, right? They're in the driver's seat for that number 1 pick. I don't think they will remain winless, but stranger things have happened.
Yeah, but you know what? Cody Kessler hasn't looked bad, so you're going to end up taking Myles Garrett with that first pick. So
we'll talk about Cody in a little bit.
But yeah, tonight is going to be about kind of talking rookies, looking at guys in this draft and who to watch, and then the big 5 games this week. But let's get started with the AFC and the AFC rookie talk. The defensive side of the ball, because I feel like most of the talent in the AFC has been on the defensive side of the ball. Who would be your, through the quarter poll, the defensive rookie of the year in the AFC?
I think it would be Jalen Ramsey, because he's really I really liked him as a prospect, but he is playing cornerback, and I had him pegged as a safety. And what he's doing as a cornerback, and the way he's getting in people's heads, and the way he's really shutting people down, I think he's as a corner, he's exceeded my expectations. Now, there was a long touchdown pass that they gave up last weekend in London, and I think Big Cat Country did a good job breaking it down why that probably was not on Jalen Ramsey. So, but I did want to mention, while we're talking about defensive rookie of the year candidates, I think he's in close competition with his teammate Yannick Ngakoue. I think that's how, is that how we pronounce it? Or is it Ngakoue?
Yeah, I think so.
He leads all rookies in sacks with 3, and he's basically been their best edge player at this point in the year. And this is a team that drafted Dante Fowler in the top 5, and they're getting their pass rush from a 3rd-round rookie. And he's really been one of the best rookie pass rushers, period, because we haven't seen Joey Bosa yet. And some of these other rookie pass rushers haven't broken through. So Yannick is doing just a terrific job for where he was selected. That value can't be denied. And I think those 2 guys right now, so Jacksonville, props, they get co-rookies of the year. And I know that up to this point, they get co-defensive rookies of the year. And I know that Jacksonville fans are also pleased with Myles Jack's first start last weekend.
And then I think that we also need to talk about, and I agree with you, I think it's Jalen Ramsey, but I think we also need to talk about Jatavis Brown from the San Diego Chargers, who I believe you liked coming out this year quite a bit. So pat yourself on the back a little bit. I think he's pretty good. And
I mean, he's stepping in for Manti Te'o, and he's Jatavis Brown was, what, a 5th-round rookie pick?
Yeah.
And I had him pegged a little higher than that. I liked him as a late day 2, early day 3 guy. Just a phenomenal playmaker at Akron, and he looks better than Manti Te'o.
When you look at the offensive side of the ball, it's really about the offensive line so far in the AFC, isn't it?
Well, not to me, because I think there's one offensive rookie in the AFC that's just heading above the rest. But I think there is some good rookie offensive line play, but that's not who I had in mind for this one.
Who'd you have?
Will Fuller, of course. I mean,
Oh
he
yeah.
has the one off game on a Thursday night. I think that he was credited with a pretty tough drop toward the end of that game too. So he ended that game with 3 catches for about 30 yards. But he comes back last weekend, scores another receiving touchdown, and then a 67-yard punt return touchdown, and kind of picks up where he had left off in the first 2 weeks. He's a dynamic player. We talked about him at length a couple of weeks ago, and I think that this guy's going to end up having a phenomenal rookie year. He's having a better season than DeAndre Hopkins, and a lot of people on Twitter are joking that he's Houston's wide receiver 1.
And a couple guys that I was going to mention on offense, I completely spaced Will Fuller. That's good because I legit couldn't think of a position player that's been impressive in the AFC. But I wanted to mention Ronnie Stanley because you and I bashed that pick. We bashed the player. We didn't think very highly of Stanley. And through 3 games, he didn't play last game, but through 3 games, he has looked incredibly solid. I wouldn't say great or anything, but he's looked very good, better than we thought he would be. I mean, and so props to them for that. I didn't see that. Another guy I wanted to mention was DeAndre Washington,
Okay.
the running back out of Oakland, who has done a very nice job as the kind of change of pace back and a guy that can spell Latavius Murray every once in a while. So I think those guys both deserve some credit for what they've done through the early part of the season.
Washington was a guy who gained steam for it was Senior Bowl, right? For his Senior Bowl practices, where he really looked like a standout at running back, which is kind of tough to do in those all-star game practice settings. So DeAndre Washington, and Seth, I know, notices DeAndre Washington's play because in our fantasy dynasty league, Seth has Latavius Murray, and so he sees those carries dwindling away. He sees that game action getting stolen by Washington there in Oakland, and I think he's a nice change of pace there, and he's got potential to pick up more carries and be a bigger part of that offense going forward.
Biggest disappointment in the AFC. I mean the Browns. No, I was kidding.
They're right on track for what they're trying to do.
I will say this, and it's not his fault, but I'm disappointed that Corey Coleman got hurt because I think we saw the good and the bad of Corey Coleman.
I totally agree. Yeah,
we saw a couple games where he just did nothing. But then he had the one game, and again, I have him on another in another fantasy league, and so I, for whatever reason, subject myself to Browns games because of football implications. And I mean, he just was dominant. I mean, he looked like the playmaker that we all thought people thought he could be. Justin and I saw that as his high-end ability. We were obviously more concerned about where he was at on the low end, but I think you saw the highs and lows of Corey Coleman. So that's a disappointment not getting to see him continue on this year and to continue to prove us wrong, which we enjoyed just as much.
Yeah, and it wasn't like we were really low on Coleman. We just thought he was more of a day 2 guy than a day 1 guy, and we liked other players like Fuller better than Corey Coleman. And Coleman had his struggles during the preseason, and then in the first game. But then that second game, he scored 2 touchdowns and really looked like he was going to be a big piece of that puzzle next across from Terrell Pryor, who's emerging as a legitimate receiver. And the Browns just have all kinds of injuries. But I don't think Coleman's play has been disappointment. But I agree with you that getting hurt, and in practice he gets hurt after his 2 touchdown games. So that was a bummer. Hopefully he's going to be back here in a few weeks. We're getting to see a heavy dose of their 4th round pick, Ricardo Lewis, in the meantime. while Pryor takes the bulk of those targets. But for me, the biggest disappointment in the AFC for rookie draft picks was Kaveri Russell, the cornerback out of Notre Dame. I loved that guy's tape in college. I thought he had a terrific bounce back year last year. He looked like a playmaker. He tested through the roof. He gets drafted by the Chiefs on day 2, and he's already been cut by the Chiefs, and now he's with the Bengals, and he's not playing. So what a huge disappointment. I don't really know what the full story is. I've heard things like he didn't learn the playbook, but it seems to me like that would be a major issue. And I think there's probably more to it than that. We just don't really know. But Russell was a player I thought could go early on day 2, and to see him already be cut, that really, really stings.
And then I think, and this isn't us trolling or anything, but I think you have to mention Myles Jack and the fact that it took 4 games for him to really get snaps and get on the field. And this was, again, Justin and I didn't think he was a bad player, but this is why we were so against the hyperbole of Myles Jack and the idea that he was a faster Ray Lewis or this football savant that was going to come in and just, be a wrecking ball in the NFL. He could still turn into a great player. But I think Justin and I's whole thing was, whoa, slow down. Let's see him get in the NFL and learn how to play the linebacker position in the NFL, because he didn't do it well in college. And I think for that, you and I were correct that he had a lot of issues playing that linebacker position. And, that's why it took him 4 games to really get onto the field.
Well, we can sit here and listen to people tell us that the reason he wasn't getting on the field was because their coaching staff's incompetent. We've heard that argument. Their excuse, the coaching staff's excuse, was that he was supposed to play one position and then they had to teach him other positions and try and find ways to get on the field. But we were told this was a player that was so versatile that you couldn't keep him off the field. And for a player to be touted as the best player in the draft, which he was touted as the best player in the draft by a couple of big name draft nicks, to not get on the field, to be a healthy, he wasn't, I don't think he was a scratch. He was playing special teams, but to not be playing snaps on defense was an eyebrow raiser, to say the least. Now, again, Jacksonville people are satisfied. They're happy with the way he played this past weekend. I watched that game. I wasn't sitting there breaking down the all 22 of it, so I couldn't. All I can say is I saw one big hit where he hit a receiver in the flat, or a running back that caught a pass in the flat. That was a nice play. Other than that, I didn't really see too much. So I think there's a to be determined on him, but given the fact that there's a strong belief out there that he was being held back by a coaching staff, and I have seen incompetent coaching staffs hold players back before. As a Cleveland fan, I've seen many. So I will give benefit of the doubt at this point, but I will say that it is an eyebrow-raising thing for him not to see defensive snaps early when if you were one of those guys that was touting him as a number 1 overall player in the draft. I still don't think that holds up.
The NFC, this one's tougher. I mean, obviously, we'll take the greatest quarterback of all time out of this and Carson Wentz, and just move to like the next set of guys. But Carson,
I wouldn't do that.
I think Carson Wentz has a lot of competition with Ezekiel Elliott, and I think those are the 2 guys. And then the tier right below is probably Dak Prescott,
right?
And who's been really good, and he's on a terrible team, but who's been really good is a guy that I love, Cody Whitehair. But he's plays center and he's on a terrible team. So, but
right.
I think your guy out of Ohio State, Taylor Decker, hasn't played bad either in Detroit. So, but
one of the bright spots there.
Yeah, I think it's a coin flip. Honestly, how much credit you give Wentz will determine whether or not you think he is the offensive rookie of the year. And then, but in the same way, I think Zeke's going to take some punishment for playing in Dallas behind that offensive line.
And a low yards per carry.
Yards per carry, yeah. Right. And so he's been a kind of a volume runner in the first 2 games. Then the last 2 games he's picked it up. But I mean, you can try and sell me on Dak Prescott. I don't know. I think it's Wentz and Elliott.
Well, I'm giving this homer alert. I'm giving this quarter pole offensive rookie of the year to Ezekiel Elliott because he leads the NFL in rushing, and he is doing that with a rookie quarterback. So I think defenses are really focused in on Zeke and trying to stop him. Now, this isn't to take away from Wentz, but his team already had a bye week. So we've seen Zeke for 4 games. We've seen Wentz for 3 really, really good games out of Wentz. And I know it's documented. We talked about his passes that are at or near or behind the line of scrimmage. That's fine. He's doing what they're asking him to do, and he's doing it really well. So I'm not trying to take away from Wentz. And like Seth's saying, it's right now it's a 2-horse race for Rookie of the Year, Offensive Rookie of the Year, and it's Wentz and Elliott. And if I'm being realistic with myself, if Wentz continues on, he's going to get the Rookie of the Year in the NFC because he's a quarterback, and people are going to give those kind of awards to quarterbacks. But Zeke, after kind of that slow start, like we said, he's busting through, and he's looking more like the guy that we saw out of Ohio State and more like the guy who a lot of people felt justified that early pick. So I'll go with Zeke at this point because if we're talking quarter pole, and I'll get technical, he's the one that's played a quarter of the games, and that's why I did that. And I also did that to get Phillies fans, raise their dander because they are super, super sensitive whenever anybody says anything to take away from anything that Carson Wentz does at this point. I think Dak Prescott, if we're talking about Dak Prescott in this Rookie of the Year conversation, I wouldn't put him in the same group as Zeke and Wentz, but I think that Dak Prescott deserves mention as my surprise pick, as my surprise rookie in the NFC, because when Dak Prescott was selected in the 4th round, obviously nobody expected him to start for Dallas right away. Everyone expected Tony Romo to start. And when Romo got hurt, everyone expected Dallas to try and trade for a veteran like Josh McCown or someone like that. And instead they go with Prescott, and Prescott's playing really well. He's kind of doing what Wentz is doing. Really very similar starts by those 2 guys. Wentz has been more successful throwing touchdown passes. But give props to Dak. He's my surprise rookie in the NFC. Defensive Rookie of the Year, though, Seth, was very tough for me to come up with. So I'll kick it to you and see who you came up with, and I'll tell you what I did.
I went with Deion Jones, who has done a really nice job in Atlanta, kind of helping that defense come along, right?
Yeah, I mean, they had major problems at linebacker, and they committed to going young at linebacker. So Deion Jones has been a productive tackler for them.
And a welcome addition. And he has some deficiencies. I'd say he's more of a Cam Chancellor type player than like a Bobby Wagner in that defense, but he can run and hit. And so
right. He's a light guy, but he's making he's aggressive. He's making plays.
Mm-hmm.
I went with Sue Cravens. I know he's kind of a package player for them, but he's filling that nickel linebacker role really well. He had a game-winning interception a couple of weeks ago Now, I think he's got a potential concussion issue that he's dealing with this week, so we don't know if he's going to be healthy this coming week. But Sue Cravens was the one that I thought of all the rookies in the NFC was doing here in Chicago, they took Leonard Floyd 9th overall, and after Leonard Floyd's first game, I thought he would be in this discussion, but that hasn't been the case. He just hasn't continued on that same path where he was in the first game. So Floyd kind of fell off for me. Craven's doing, kind of playing that hybrid defensive role that people like, and I think is going to, Deion Buchanan had kind of popularized that. We know it's not really a new thing per se, but Jabril Peppers, obviously we've talked about, is the next guy in line for that type of role. And I think with Cravens, what really surprised me was how poorly he tested and how high he was still drafted, and now he seems to be justifying that take. So disappointment, Seth. I'm curious who you have, because I thought this one was really obvious.
Go ahead.
Laquan Treadwell. I mean, this is a first-round wide receiver, and he is not getting snaps on that Minnesota offense. And he's got guys like Charles Johnson, who's, for my money, been completely ineffective as an NFL player for the most part. And then Adam Thielen, who was pretty much just a special teams player coming into the year. So here's Laquan Treadwell, highly touted. Some people stood in, dug their heels in, and said he was wide receiver 1 in this past class. And he has been a healthy scratch, I believe, for at least one game, right?
Yes. And I would almost agree with you if I was an Arizona Cardinals fan. And our own Robert Kimdiche, 15 snaps on the season, the last 3 games inactive. In fact,
and we love that pick, by the way.
He was so inactive that the Cardinals, I gotta find it. The Cardinals were without their top 2 backup defensive tackles tonight. So they had their 2 starting defense tackles, but they were without their top 2 backups, and he still was inactive in the game.
Geez.
So I text in our group text with Kyle Posey. I text, I'd be shocked if he played before the bye week, unless there's just like a litany of injuries. But yeah, he's been a huge disappointment, just not being able to get on the field. I mean, he's literally played 15 snaps this season, and with a team that was supposed to be, great and has struggled out of the gate, to not get anything from their entire draft class is rough.
Right. They've already cut a couple guys from the draft class, right?
They cut their 5th and 6th round pick. Brandon Williams started. He was their 3rd round pick. You and I.
That was a disaster of a pick. I mean, a former running back basically picked to play cornerback on the strength of a fast 40 time.
Yep, and he was torched in the first game, and then Marcus Cooper came in and took his position, and then in the 3rd game, he was a healthy scratch. He was active tonight, but didn't really play at all. So, the Cardinals, you could just say their draft class has been a disappointment. So,
yeah, and a lot of people are going to sit here and say that this whole class was weak, but we're seeing that's not really the case. We're seeing some really good performances out of this class. So I think it does say something for a team like Arizona, where we thought Arizona was like one of the contenders, and to have what we thought overall was a poor draft after Kimdiche, and it's really coming to fruition. And it's something that over time, this is a group that's probably earned a mulligan, but over time that kind of thing really will catch up to you.
Yeah, it will. And so you just hope that it's not, a long-standing type thing. Anything else on the rookies that you wanted to hit on?
No, I just wanted to pick Zeke over Wentz to just kind of just to get people riled up. But
The thing is with that, like, honestly, I think it's a coin flip. I really do.
I think those guys are going to battle it out all year, right? I mean,
yeah. When it's all said and done, it's going to come down to Zeke and Wentz, and then the defensive rookie of the year is probably going to come down to Ramsey and I don't know who in the NFC. I mean, probably just Ramsey for defensive rookie of the year, unless somebody else does something big.
Yeah.
What about?
Yeah, I mean, we'll see if somebody emerges. Like before we start taping, you mentioned Carl Joseph. He's just he came on strong early, but he has not played enough games to merit that kind of consideration yet.
Let's move on to the draft talk, and we wanted to start with kind of your guys. Who are your guys that you've kind of picked up heading into this draft?
Yeah, we kind of wanted to just kind of keeping with the general theme where we're giving out awards. We're talking about just through some teams have played 4 games, some have played 5 in college football. So just at this point, a few guys that we kind of have a feel for that are going to be good prospects or that are kind of disappointing prospects to us at this point, at least relative to where they've been touted. For me, my guys, I've been really impressed with DeShone Kizer. I know that people have a thing against redshirt sophomore quarterbacks. I also know that it's fully possible that DeShone Kizer is going to come back to Notre Dame next year and play college football in 2017 and not be in the draft. But I think that he just does things that I don't see other quarterbacks doing. Things that you want to see an NFL out of an NFL prospect. The way he stands in under pressure, keeps his head up, is able to slide and still make the throw instead of panicking. When you see some of these mobile quarterbacks, when that pocket starts to break down, their default is to run. And with Kizer, I don't feel like that's his default. I think he will kind of try and slide over right or left and then keep his head up and keep his eyes downfield and make those plays down the field and throw those strikes. Now he's fallen off a little bit on the third down passing and he hasn't been the most accurate guy, but he's taking a ton of shots downfield. He has established career highs in passing yards for the game for the last couple of weeks. And he's having to put up tons of points because their defense isn't stopping anybody. So this is a player who is only 21 years old, and he has a fairly limited number of starts. We've talked about on the show how NFL scouts consider a number of starts and number of wins important. So Kizer now, I think he's around 16, 17 starts in his career. He's going to have over 20 starts. He's going to have around the same number of starts as Carson Wentz had when he got drafted, and he's going to be younger as a player. So Kizer is a guy that I just think is going to be a really good NFL player. Now, it might take some time because he's super young, but what he's doing as a quarterback and the way he responded to criticism from his own coach, which we said was unfair in our minds last week, I was happy with his response. Even if they were still giving up a ton of points to Syracuse, he put 51 on the board and threw for 471 yards. What do you think about Kizer? Because I still see some mixed reviews, but to me, he looks like a no doubt top 10 type of quarterback.
I really like Kizer. I think he's gonna, when I sit down and kind of review him, and he's a guy I've watched pretty much every throw he's made. My wife and her family are Notre Dame fans, so I watch all those games, and he obviously makes some young and dumb plays, right, a lot, but
his interception last week was pretty bad. I mean, he's having some of those same recognition issues that we saw out of Jameis Winston with the underneath coverage, right?
I text you. I think when I sit down and kind of look through it, you're going to see a guy that comes out in scores, not in ability, but in scores, similar to what I thought of like Wentz and Bortles, where they're guys that I would love for a team in the back end of the first round to get and be able to, groom. Obviously, Wentz and Bortles both did better than I thought they would, but I think they'll have the same type. He's going to have the same type of ability. I think he's a very talented guy. He's a guy that, if you're a team like Arizona, you'd love to get an opportunity to draft him to be kind of the heir apparent.
So maybe I'm making a little bit of a, it'll remain to be seen if I'm making a mistake or not, but I'm projecting Kizer to actually be a better prospect than those two guys. Obviously, I wasn't super high on Wentz. I thought he was more of a third, fourth round guy. And then with Bortles, to me, he was like a late first round guy. But both players were older coming out than what Kizer's going to be if he declares this year. And that could be dangerous. I could be making a dangerous mistake because we have seen players that we thought would take that next step, not take the next step.
Yeah. And I think that's always the fear with a guy like Kizer, who's so young.
Mm-hmm.
But I think talent-wise, I think he's going to end up being, like I said, I think he's going to end up being a really good player. And I think he has the ability. And the fact that he's kind of dealing with this BS Brian Kelly thing right now, I think that shows a lot to NFL teams. Like,
I loved his response coming back from that criticism. Not only did he own it, but then he goes out and throws for almost 500 yards and puts up the necessary number of points to win that game. Some of these games turned into shootouts. But, sticking with the quarterbacks, another one of my guys is Mitch Trubisky. I've been really enjoying watching him over the last 4 games, and the streak he's on is just phenomenal. 81% completion percentage. And as we mentioned before, he's not just throwing bunny shots. He's taking throws downfield, and he's completing them. He's I think I saw a stat, maybe it was from Pro Football Focus, where he's connecting on like 50% of throws 20 yards down the field. That is a really good number. And then to have 13 touchdowns and no picks, no interceptions on the season. So even if you include that game against Georgia where he wasn't on the top of his game, 13 touchdowns, I think, on the year, no interceptions. He's run for a few touchdowns. And if you look at his play as a backup last year, he was 40 for 47 passing last year. This accuracy is not new. He's a very precise thrower right now. He's got plenty of arm strength. We talked about his size, where he's more like a Derek Carr type of build. So he's not a really big, imposing size guy like a Cardale Jones or like a Kizer, or even like a Bortles or a Wentz, right? But he has plenty of arm. He's an athletic guy, and I'm really impressed with him. He's a redshirt junior. We don't know if he's going to declare either, but so far I've watched a few quarterbacks, and some of the guys that I wanted to like have kind of left me hanging, and then these two guys, Kizer and Trubisky, are players that have stood out to me.
What about guys that have disappointed for you through the first kind of half of the season?
Well,
first quarter. I don't know. How do you define the college football? It's like
I think I take it as like 3 games as a quarter, 6 as a half, because we're talking.
All right, so we're almost
12 game seasons, and then you have the conference championship, and then bowl game, playoffs, that kind of thing. So we're almost halfway through college season, and some of my disappointments are Jalen Hurd. Obviously, I can't believe people were talking about him as being better than Derrick Henry, and I know I've kind of hammered on this guy almost every week, but 4 fumbles in 5 games. Last week, he catches a pass. He's wide open, and he's got a path to the end zone, and he kind of lets up because he thinks he's got a clear path, and he gets drilled from behind by a safety on Georgia and fumbles and turns the ball over. Sloppy play, not a good runner. some people have brought up to me that they think Hurd should transition to like an H-back or tight end. And normally, as I've done this more and more, I'm normally against position changes because I think it stunts growth. And I think players are should kind of stay where they are to maximize their potential. But in this case, I'm not sure that's such a bad idea because he did look natural catching the ball, and he doesn't look good as a running back. He's just a stagnant runner. He doesn't have any juice as a running back for me, and now he doesn't have ball security. So Tennessee, it's funny because we preview Tennessee every week because they're always playing top 25 teams. So we always mention Jalen Hurd. And for anybody who's drawing comparisons to Derrick Henry, just sheerly on size, it's the only reason you would compare the two, and it's not even close. So another guy that's disappointing to me that other people like is Mike Williams, the receiver from Clemson. I just don't see him as a number one receiver. Some people have said he's the top receiver in the draft, at least as far as seniors go. Not for me. I couldn't tell you a senior off the top of my head that's better. But like Ryan Switzer, I know they're going to play different positions. Switzer's going to be a slot guy and Williams is an outside guy. But Ryan Switzer is such a better playmaker to me than what Mike Williams offers. And the guy just doesn't do it for me. And the last guy I want to mention as far as disappointments, and this is not to say he is not a good player because I think this guy I think is a good prospect. But Malik McDowell, he winds up on the ground. This is the Michigan State defensive lineman that some people have said is a top 5 pick. And when McDowell is playing inside, he gets a tremendous amount of push on some of these interior linemen. But in the process, he's leaning so far forward that he winds up on the ground. And when you wind up on the ground, even if you get penetration, you are done at that point. Unless you're able to get the ankle or force him into a teammate, you're done. You're out of the play. A running back can run around you or hop over you. A quarterback can slide to one side or the other and get away from you. And we've seen it happen. So we saw it against Wisconsin. I've seen it on some of the other vines that people tweeted. It's not that I don't think McDowell's good. It's just that I don't really love him inside. Even though he gets really good push, he's just a little bit out of control. He's just a little out of control, and I want to see him kind of hone all of that ability.
Yeah, and that's the hard part with guys. You know, like coming out of Michigan State, we've talked about this before. You know, what defensive linemen have come out that have really shined? You know what I'm saying?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, they've had some guys like Jarrell Worthy, who I liked. And I think McDowell's a better.
Oh, yeah. I'm not trying to say, but, you know, they've been a hard team to figure out in that sense.
Yeah, Golston a couple of years ago. That was another guy built like McDowell.
Well, and you look at it like, honestly, like we weren't all that high on Le'Veon Bell. Obviously, that's offense, but you just kind of look at it, and it's crazy to watch them because you never know, you know, kind of who's going to show up and who's not going to show up for them in that.
Well, what you see with McDowell is you'll see somebody tweet a vine and it'll say, look at him dominate this guard, right? And he will, and then he will push the guard down onto his back, and then he'll land on the guard, and then he's out of the play. So you need him to – one of the things, like, for example, I use Javon Hargrave as an example. One of the things we saw out of Hargrave at his lower level competition, obviously, was he would make that play by throwing the guard out of the way and staying upright and making the play. And that's where McDowell has to finish. Maybe because he's too tall or because he's so tall he's getting having a problem with his balance where he's leaning so far forward to get that push. But that could be an issue. And that was one of the problems I had with Henry Anderson a couple years ago. He was getting that penetration, but he was winding up on the ground. And then he's not finishing the job. And one of the things I like when McDowell lines up outside And if they want to get pressure up the middle with him, they can run him on a stunt, and he's effective that way. I think he's athletic enough to stay outside, honestly. And that might be if some team can play him at left defensive end or something like that, where he.
I love him. I love him in an attacking 3-4 too, like what Arizona runs, or
sure,
even kind of. You hate saying stuff like this, but like in a JJ Watt type role where he can attack, unrelentlessly up the field. So, but I hate saying stuff like that because then you get, oh, you're comparing him to JJ. No, I just want him using.
You just said he was better than JJ Watt.
Exactly. Well, I mean, I did just get to watch the best two Big Ten teams play last week in Michigan and Wisconsin. So that was. That was quite
the second and third best.
Who are we watching this weekend, Justin?
Well, I'll be watching Ohio State and Indiana, of course, because I want to see my guy Curtis Samuel, who is the best all-purpose back in the country, better than that guy out in Stanford by the name of McCaffrey. But Curtis Samuel is on pace for 1,000 yards receiving and 1,000 yards rushing, and if he keeps that pace,
that good?
Well, it might be, because if he keeps that pace, he would be the first player in FBS history to do it. And I think the only player in the upper level of college football to do that, but I'm including Division I, Division I AA, FBS, FCS, is Brian Westbrook, who played for the Eagles and obviously became an NFL star. So Curtis Samuel is Ohio State, Indiana doesn't seem like appointment watching, but Indiana's kind of given them fits in the Urban Meyer era. So it's an interesting game. I think Ohio State will roll, but I really Curtis Samuel to me is must-see TV at this point. And you've got JT Barrett making his case for the Heisman as well. But let's get to the real games that should be, more competitive. So Virginia Tech. Yeah, Virginia Tech and UNC. I mentioned Trubisky. Let's see if he can keep that game, that's insane streak rolling. Again, over 80% completion percentage for 4 games in a row. Almost unheard of, and still no picks on the year. Again, we got Tennessee because they have another this is a top 10 matchup, right? They're playing Texas A&M. So you've got Derek Barnett, who statistically is outplaying Myles Garrett, but who from a prospect standpoint, I don't think it's close. I think Myles Garrett's still the guy.
Way better, yeah.
Yeah. So those are the 2 players to watch. Forget about Hurd, or unless you're thinking about him as an H-back. We got Bama, Arkansas. That's Arkansas's offensive line has played really well. And you've got that strong Bama front 7, so that's always fun. And then is FSU and Miami still going to happen? We have hurricane activity. We've seen a number of Florida games canceled. So as of now, that's still showing up as it's a go, but that's supposed to be the primetime game. And I'm going to come back to this one when we do the hot takes. And then the last one that I have on my list is Texas, Oklahoma, Red River rivalry. And that's, I think, noon Eastern time from the Cotton Bowl. So this isn't quite the game that it used to be. But Texas is on Charlie Strong getting fired watch right now. And I think it's I think
changed in the last 5 weeks.
Well, I've been talking to people and saying this should have been done after last season. But Charlie Strong is a well-respected guy, obviously. They wanted to give him another chance. I'm so tired of people telling me that he inherited this mess. How long has he been there? How many years is that an excuse? This guy is not getting it done, and Texas is a big-time program that deserves – their fan base is demanding better, and I don't see how Strong makes it through this season. Even if they get an upset in this game, Tom Herman's sitting right there in the state, and if they don't try and nab him, somebody else is going to.
Anything else you wanted to?
Well, I just have one. I don't know how many. Do you have any hot takes this week?
Um, let me pull back what I had here real quick. Go ahead
All
with
right.
yours.
All right. Well, you're looking for that. I'm going to go back to that Miami Florida State game. So if this game does in fact take place, we need to talk about this take that came across from the Bleacher Report NFL feed this week on Twitter. And this is a report. It says the tweet reads, 3 NFL teams tell NFL Draft Scout that they have a higher draft grades on Miami quarterback Brad Kaya than on Clemson quarterback Deshaun Watson. So, Seth, I know you compared Deshaun Watson to Russell Wilson as a prospect, and we know that Deshaun Watson is not off to the most blazing hot start. But we did see Watson come back and win a game week 1 where they were against Auburn. It wasn't a comeback, but he overcame a slow start and was clutch down the stretch. And then last week, he throws 3 interceptions, but he ends up out-dueling everybody's favorite underclassman, Lamar Jackson, in Louisville. In a primetime game, he overcomes those turnovers, throws 5 touchdown passes. He comes up big late in the game. So Deshaun Watson, to me, is still a player when we're talking about top quarterbacks in this draft class, assuming he comes out. I think he has gotten shortchanged by his offensive line. I don't think they have played well. I don't think, unlike years past, I don't think that Clemson has great weapons around him. I think a lot of their skill players are pretty average, other than the tight end Leggett, who I think is above average for his position. I'm still Team Watson. I don't buy this Kaya over Watson stuff. Not for a second. I found it to be quite a hot take because Kaya was another player. I think people are counting on him to get like a Mark Richt bump here. I'm not really sure. But
I think they are, yeah.
Yeah, and I think if this game does take place Saturday night, that will show us some things about Kaya. But one of my issues with him is I just think he gets overthinks things a little too much, and I see his feet kind of get tangled, or he makes a play flat-footed. It's not to say that Kaya is not a good player. I haven't really watched him enough to say one way or the other. But Watson is a guy who took his team to the national championship as a sophomore, and I think he deserves the benefit of the doubt in this discussion.
Yeah, and I'm not like a huge Kaya fan right now, but honestly, I stopped paying attention to him before Rick got there too. I mean, he wasn't bad his freshman year, but last year was just the program at Miami was just a dumpster fire. So I don't blame Kaya for that. I had a couple hot takes. We can start with this one. It's interesting. Our buddy Luke Easterling of NFL Draft Wire, the Draft Wire for USA Today, asked the question, will missing snaps in 2016 help LSU's Leonard Fournette have a longer, better NFL career? Now, it wasn't too long ago that at this very show, we discussed that 2 years ago, and last year even, people were telling Leonard Fournette to sit out and not play college football anymore because it would help his draft stock. If anything, and again, this is just my opinion, but if anything, I think it makes you wonder, like, what's going on with Fournette. We talked about DeShone Kizer and his issues with Brian Kelly. We know Fournette has an injury. We do. But how serious is that injury that it's, he's kind of taking his time to come back?
I think that it's a legitimate injury. I saw the injury take place a couple of weeks ago, and he left the field. I think on first look, it looked like it might even be a more serious injury. And I think that Les Miles has a track record. Now the departed Les Miles has a track record of holding of these timeshare running back committees so that he doesn't burn out guys. Fournette kind of belied that last year with his production, where he was getting the ball a ton, and their backup was a distant backup. So now I think that LSU probably feels more comfortable with Darius Geis, who's a true sophomore, and they thought that, this is a week we can hold Fournette out and not lose much, and Geis can handle it from there. And he did. And some people think that Geis is a better prospect than Fournette. I can't say that yet. I haven't broken Geis down because he's a true sophomore and he's not eligible. But the idea that that missing time is going to help him become a better NFL player, that's kind of lost on me, because there's really no evidence that guys sort of preserving themselves in college end up becoming better running backs, right? This was, I think, an argument used in favor of drafting Ronnie Brown early when he was the backup for Cadillac Williams, and he ended up being drafted ahead of Cadillac Williams. But you also have guys like Le'Veon Bell and Matt Forte, who have had tons and tons of college carries and receptions and end up having long, productive careers. Curtis Martin was another one that comes to mind. I know that that's not exactly a modern example, nor would Ricky Williams be, but the point is, I don't think there's any evidence to say that these guys can't have long careers. I think there are a lot of other factors that go into it than just college carries. And in Fournette's case, he's a big guy. He's dealing with these nagging injuries. That the nagging injuries are going to – the question should be, are the nagging injuries going to affect his draft stock? But I don't think missing snaps helps him become a better player later. Football players are better when they're playing football.
And then the other hot take that I found interesting, and just researching for the show tonight and, looking over things, I then stumbled upon the Bleacher Report 1000, and they have their rookie section. I don't know if you knew this, but they have a rookie section. And
Bleacher Report, what is Bleacher Report 1000, Seth?
our good buddy Ian Wharton and Kyle Posey are a part of it.
Right.
They do
yeah. Ian just told us about that, right?
And so, I like to get other people's opinions and get outside opinions as well as, my own. And and like I mentioned, I didn't think about Will Fuller as I kind of went through all my notes and stuff like that and saw what other people were thinking. And so I went back and I looked, and Will Fuller is the 6th rated wide receiver on rookies.
I thought you were going to say overall receiver.
No, 6th rated rookie wide receiver on the BR 1000. So
do you happen to know who the other 5 are?
I do. I do.
I'm assuming it's Rashard Higgins, Sterling Shepard, Tajay Sharp, all the draft Twitter darlings that have like 0 to 11 catches this year.
Let me pull it right back up here. Here we go. Wide receivers. So I gotta scroll.
I mean, we saw while you're looking for that, we saw like draft Twitter, fantasy Twitter too. By the way, loved Rashard Higgins, for example, and that guy was a 5th round pick who is, with Corey Coleman injured, with Josh Gordon still suspended and now in treatment. Rashard Higgins is not seeing snaps. He's behind Ricardo Lewis, which somebody predicted. if I recall correctly. Somebody on this very show. So, I don't know, man. Will Fuller being sixth in the NFL as overall receiver sounds about right now. Again, we talked about it. This is a player who is out targeting DeAndre Hopkins. They obviously have huge plans for this guy, to the point where last week it was kind of things were kind of tight, and they throw him back there on kickoff returns or on punt returns, and he returns one for a touchdown.
So, yeah, so I can't find the list right now, so I'll have to find it. I'll get it out there. But yeah, I just thought it was interesting. You know, it's always interesting how people grade things differently and look at things kind of differently from everybody else.
We're just happy he's on the list.
You know, it's just interesting because you look at, and you know, we can end on this, and you look at it, and there's too often, and you and I have talked about this. There's too often that guys that do this want to take their evals into the season. And in reality, you just have to let it go. Like, it happened. It is what it is. You're either right or wrong. Like, you've already put the work in. So that's the end of it. And so,
right. And I kind of played on that earlier when I said Zeke over Wentz, you know, because we talked about Wentz last week, the week before that. And that's going to be an ongoing theme. Where did we go wrong if he continues, or where did I go wrong if he continues on this path? You know,
well, and even I mean, I give you guys crap, but even I'm wrong thinking that he's like a late day one pick. I mean, that needed to come in and play behind like a Carson Palmer for a couple of years. So,
and it does remain to be seen. And
right, yeah,
because we have, as we said last week, we have seen players get off to fast starts, and this applies to Fuller too, because we're joking a lot about people dogging him, but this applies to receivers too. This applies to any position. We've seen guys get up to hot starts and then fade into the background. So this is all in fun. Time will tell. But I love the BR1000 day. What is it? Every Thursday?
Yeah,
every Thursday it's BR1000 day.
It's a treasure trough of.
We could do a whole hour on it, really, because of between what we think about it and what other people are tweeting about it, because it really gets people upset, especially the quarterback section.
It's fun. It's fun.
Yeah.
So, you got anything else tonight before we head out of here?
No, just follow us. Follow us on SoundCloud. Subscribe on iTunes. We're gonna have a lot more in store as the season gets going. Check us out also at Revenge of the Birds, where Seth is the managing editor, and I do a draft column every Friday called Rough Draft, where we touch on some of the same stuff, some different stuff, but I try and fit it all in. And then if you're on Draft Breakdown and your eyes are tired from looking at all the awesome videos that we have uploaded there, check out the article section, and I do every week box score scouting where we look inside different numbers. So appreciate all of you guys that listen every week. We're going to try and keep the content going strong and steady throughout the season and into draft season. So stick with us. If you stick with us, you would have heard us talk about Mitch Trubisky from UNC last week before everyone started hopping on this week.
That's right. Yeah, exactly. Impress your friends, dazzle them at the bar with your knowledge that you gain from Justin in this fantastic job he does here. But thank you as always for listening. We'll be back next week, hopefully on Monday or Wednesday, so we can get Justin out of here a little earlier. But I'm Seth Cox. That's Justin Higdon. We'll be back next week. Thanks for listening, everybody.